Welcome back to Koine Korner. Today we're taking a look at Hebrews chapter 9 verses 27 and 28. There's a lot of stuff leading up to those verses, and in a moment I'm going to go through a little summary of the text that leads up to it. But before that, I'd like to encourage you to hit pause and go and read Hebrews chapter 9 verses 11 through 26. And if you don't want to read that much, at least read 23 through 26. And after that, I'm going to do a quick summary just to cover what leads up to the two verses we're looking at today. So go ahead and hit pause on the video and I'll wait here. Welcome back. Thank you for reading that. Hope you enjoyed it. And here's a quick summary of what was seen in that chunk leading up to verses 27 and 28. So the tabernacle in the wilderness and later the temple in Jerusalem were a type or a pattern of the plan of salvation. So we had an earthly model that people literally walked through, lived through, on a yearly basis through a pattern of festivals and offerings, etc., to understand the plan of salvation. We saw that people came for the forgiveness of their sins through the offering of a substitutionary sacrifice. They would bring an innocent life that would be sacrificed, the blood of which presented in place of their guilty life. So my sins are atoned for by the offering of an innocent, being the pattern, of course, leading up to the offering of the sinless Christ on behalf of sinners. So here we have that great, bloody, earthy, very tangible way of teaching people the wages of sin is death, but through a sacrifice that is not of the sinner but of a sinless one, there can be forgiveness and a new lease on life. So we see that, and we also see in the lead up to the verses we're looking at today some comments on the ratification of covenants. No covenant is ratified without the shedding of blood. We think about the Abrahamic covenant being ratified through the rite of circumcision, a boy's entrance into the covenant was a bloody affair. We think about the marriage covenant, and historically in virginal marriage, there was proof shown to the community that blood was spilled on the wedding night, ratifying the covenant, etc. He goes on to talk about wills and how a will doesn't come into effect until the person dies. There has to be death for that type of covenant to be fulfilled, etc. And it leads us up to our verses for today, 27 and 28. We'll take each verse by itself and we'll have to break them down. There's a lot of stuff to look at, but I'm going to try and go quickly. So let's take a look at verse 27 in the ESV. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. So let's take a peek in Koine. We'll look at it in two different parts. Kai kathosen apoketai tois anthropois hapax apothanein. And just as it has been stored away or appointed for men to die once. So take a look at that word apoketai. We've heard people say, let's see what fate has in store for him, or when he gets home, he'll find out what's in store for him, something like that. This word, this phrase, is where we get that notion. So what the writer of Hebrews, probably Paul, says is that all men, all mankind, has something in store for it, and that is to die hapax once. So death is coming for everyone. Whether or not there'll be a second death is a different subject for a different day. Reading from Revelation, interesting subject, but not what we're looking at today. So for all humans, it is appointed, it is stored away, it is set aside to die once. And then we get the next part of the verse, meta de tuto krisis. And after this, after what? After this one death, judgment, a process of judgment. Why do I say a process of judgment? Because it's krisis and not krima. He doesn't say, and it's appointed to all men to die once, and after this, krima, a verdict. There will be a verdict at the end of the judgment, but it's the process that he tells us awaits all men, death and a process of judgment. So that's what we know is in store for all, a singular death and then judgment. Let's take a look at 28. So Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly awaiting for him. We're going to take this in 4 chunks. There's a lot to be looked at here. The first chunk in Koine, hutos kai ho Christos hapax prosenektes. So also Christ, having been offered once, hapax again, like we had with the one death, it is given to men to die once. It is appointed or set aside for men to die once. And here we see Christ also has been offered once. For what? What is the purpose? Estopolon ananenkein hamartias. Estopolon, for the many, ananenkein, to bear hamartias, sins, for the sins of many, to bear the sins of many. Let's go to the third chunk. Ek deutero chorus hamartias ophthesetai. He shall appear, ophthesetai, he shall appear a second time, ek deuteru, chorus hamartias, not for sin, apart from sin, separate from sin. The second appearing is not related to sin. The first appearing, when he was offered up once for the sins of many, was for sin. The second appearing, not for sin. What is it for then? That gets us to the fourth chunk. Tois auton apek decomenois eis soterion. So, complicated sentence because of the word order. I want to start with the last 2 words, eis soterion, but for salvation. So not for sin, but for salvation. Tois apek decomenois, for the ones eagerly awaiting auton him. So the second appearing is for the salvation of those who are eagerly awaiting him. So let's go back to the block that you read before these verses. It was all about the high priestly ministry in the tabernacle and the offering of blood, the sprinkling of blood. Nothing is cleansed without the shedding of blood. No covenant is ratified without the shedding of blood. The loss of life brings about the enactment of a will. And here we go back to that notion. The earthly priesthood and the temple offerings only expurgated sin once a year, right? We had the Day of Atonement. People brought sacrifices all throughout the year. They attended festivals that involved sacrifices. But once a year, the sins of the people were atoned for in Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when the high priest entered into the most holy place and sprinkled the blood on the mercy seat. And when that blood of the sacrifice was accepted by God, the people were forgiven and the sins of the year were expurgated. A new year, a new start, a fresh slate, as it were. And we're told that Christ appeared once for the sins, offered himself once for the sins of many. And we know from the cross, tetelestai, it has been finished and remains finished. It's a one-time offering for all sin. But then we read that when he appears again, he will appear again, and it's not for sin, it's for salvation of those eagerly awaiting. Think about this. Think about it this way. It's to complete the plan of salvation, like the high priest went on Yom Kippur before the mercy seat and presented the blood so that the forgiveness act would be brought to completion. And this is for those who are eagerly awaiting. Think about the Day of Atonement again, back in the earthly model. The high priest went in, and we're told that there was a line, a rope tied to his ankle, so that if he went in there and was impure, was sinful himself and was rejected, he would be stricken dead in the most holy place, and the rope was to pull him back out. When he goes in, it's a high stakes situation, and the people outside are eagerly awaiting his appearing. Why? Because if he comes back out, they know that the offering has been accepted, that their sins are forgiven, and that their covenant with God is renewed, that they have life, not just with each other, but they have life with God because their sins are forgiven and the offering has been accepted. So think about this magnificence of Christ's second appearing for the salvation of those who are eagerly awaiting. When he reappears, we know that his perfect offering, his perfect sinless offering on behalf of sinners has been accepted, and therefore salvation is ours. Why is it ours? Not because our faith was sufficient in quantity or quality, not because we did the right deeds, not because we celebrated the right festivals, but because the offering of Christ once for all was sufficient and perfect, sinless, in place of sinners, so that when it's presented at the mercy seat, the sins are forgiven, expurgated, washed away, not just for 1 year, but for eternity. Magnificent stuff. If you're struggling with that, and if you're not sure if it applies to you, I would recommend that you go back and reread the reading from today, including these two verses. Take it all the way, Hebrews 9, all the way from 11 through 28, and consider that this isn't about you. You eagerly await the appearing of the one whose perfect offering was made once for many, and whose presentation before the mercy seat is sufficient once for all. It is set aside for us for all humans to die once and then the judgment, but in that judgment, what's being judged is the sinless sacrifice of Christ, presented by the ultimate high priest, Christ himself, so that when he appears, our eager awaiting is satisfied with salvation. Great stuff. Thanks for joining me today. If this was beneficial to you, please hit subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, or if you have any questions, complaints, or arguments, and we'll take it from there. And I'll see you next time. Until then, Charis Kai Reina Humin, grace and peace to you.